And we all know by now how much we stand to lose, that our democracy rests on a knife's edge until Tuesday. But in this last bit of Sunday morning real estate before the final ballots are cast, I want to focus on one issue that represents both the life and death stakes of this election and the potential upset of a great deal of political common wisdom about American politics. And that issue is abortion rights. The constitutionally protected right to abortion was stripped away in an instant with the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade on June 24th, 2022. And the upheaval of women's health care, including a gruesome parade of first-person medical horror stories that has followed, has reshaped the politics of the abortion fight in ways that could be game-changing in this election. And if there's one person in the country who can help us understand what's happening with abortion rights, who can sort the truth from the political spin, who knows the history and has been reporting on it for decades, it's my friend and colleague, Rachel Maddow. After the 2009 assassination of the Kansas abortion doctor George Tiller, Rachel produced a documentary about it that included crucial context about the violent fringe of the anti-abortion movement. After that, Rachel continued to follow the threat of violence against abortion providers. In the 2010s, when Republicans swept state House majorities and began passing unprecedented new abortion restrictions, she was one of the very few journalists in the country to pay constant and unrelenting attention to these efforts to chip away at the rights that were, at the time, guaranteed by Roe v. Wade. When Roe turned 40 in 2013, the inside of an abortion clinic was rarely ever seen on television. And her show visited 5 of them in embattled states where abortion had already nearly been eliminated by a combination of hostile state governments, harassment, and threats of violence. And in 2019, when Donald Trump's reshaping of the Supreme Court was in progress, she hosted a special hour full of original reporting and historical context that served as a flashing red light of what was to come in 2022. You know that we are deeply committed to covering the erosion of reproductive rights in this country. We bear witness to the erosion of the rights of women on every single show we do, which is why I'm so grateful that Rachel has agreed to join me this morning, playing the role of the amazing reporter that she is and sharing this special report and her own analysis on this crucial and potentially decisive issue. Rachel, this is only the second time we've had this luxury, so thank you so much, because that's how important this is.
Well, Ali, thank you for giving me this space to do it. I realize this is your final Sunday before the election. This is real estate on your show. I'm really grateful for the chance to talk to your audience about it. We put together this special report, I think, to illuminate something that I think has flummoxed a lot of the political class and the pundit class in particular, but is easier to see if you take sort of a different lens on it. So, in an election in which basically no reputable political forecaster is saying he or she definitely knows how this thing is going to go overall, there is one expectation for the vote this year that forecasters do seem to be pretty comfortable predicting at this point, and that is that there will be a massive gender gap, possibly the largest in history. More women casting their ballots for Democrats, more men casting their ballots for Republicans. Now, on the Republican side, in terms of the campaign, the presidential campaign of Trump and Vance has really leaned into this. They have effectively abandoned any sustained substantive effort to try to appeal to women voters, while they have tried, sometimes quite awkwardly, to up their campaign's perceived machismo or virility or something. Republicans holding up jars of what they said was J.D. Vance's sperm after he was selected as Trump's running mate. Yes, that really happened. Trump himself talking about the size of another man's penis. Trump saying his plans for women will happen, quote, whether they like it or not. There was also a long riff from a top Trump surrogate about America being a, quote, very bad girl who is going to get a very, quote, vigorous spanking from Daddy Trump. And it's not going to hurt the daddy at all, but it's definitely going to hurt the girl. And that's a good thing. This was at an official rally for a presidential campaign just days before Election Day. It has all been a little bit weird. And so, yes, the expectation is there will be a gender gap, perhaps like none we've ever seen before. But On the Democratic side, of course, you can see it less in the campaign and more in the campaign's stated expectations. Both the Harris campaign and other Democratic campaigns this year are willing to state, they will tell you that they expect more than anything to benefit electorally from the issue of reproductive rights. The question, though, is how much should they expect to benefit from that issue? And there is an underappreciated reason that even now remains a mathematical black box. It is an unpollable metric. The American public's reaction to the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the imposition of new Republican abortion bans in 21 states, is not yet in focus in terms of how strong it will be as an electoral factor. And that is because the American public's understanding of what these bans mean is something that is growing and changing every day. And that is because women are coming forward themselves. And in particular, because there is increasingly good and prolific investigative and shoe leather journalism about the real world impact of the Trump abortion bans in America. And it is changing Americans' understanding day by day of something that the anti-abortion movement fought for years, for decades, to keep out of the political fight on this issue. And it is the fact, the contested fact, but the unmissable fact that abortion is health care. And you've heard that phrase, right? For a long time, that has sounded like a slogan to many Americans for the pro-choice side. It has sounded maybe like a branding effort, maybe something that's a little bit hard to understand. Abortion is health care. But now we are seeing it in the news, in our faces every day. This raw and now very visceral, undeniable fact that when the government makes abortion a crime, you take away health care from American women. That is health care they need to stay alive. Banning abortion hurts and kills women, American women, in our generation, in our time. And abortion has always been health care. A midwife from the 1850s knew that as well as any obstetrician knows it today. But the anti-abortion movement in this country for decades has insisted on messaging, not just that abortion is bad or wrong, but more insidiously, they have insisted that abortion is not needed, that it's elective, that it's an indulgence, that it's a sin, that it's not part of health care. And even while we had 5 decades of federally protected abortion rights in this country, that messaging campaign from the anti-abortion side, it seeped into mainstream thinking, even among people who largely supported reproductive freedom. Even reasonable, moderate-thinking people started believing that abortion is a marginal thing, that it's at best a regrettable necessity, that it can be severed from women's health care without bringing down the whole women's health care system, right? That it can be severed from all these other things that keep women alive, that you can take abortion away without causing needless suffering and preventable deaths among American women. And it turns out it cannot. And ahead of this election, the American public is learning that in real time, broadly and bluntly, seeing in the news now every day what 2+ years of Trump abortion bans is doing to collapse women's health care in the United States. And so here it is. This is what women's health care looks like in post-Roe America. It looks like Carmen Brewster, who spent 19 days miscarrying, bleeding, blacking out from the pain, unable to eat, and denied health care, because the health care she needed is what's known as a D&C, dilation and curettage, the procedure used in surgical abortions. And abortion is banned in Idaho, which is where Carmen lives. Here she is on a hospital bed, literally crying for help.
I've been actively miscarrying since the 8th. I have gone to a doctor, and this is my 2nd visit to the ER. If you're wondering why women's rights matter, I'm just gonna bleed out on this table before somebody comes and actually helps me. This is my life. Nobody actually is coming down. They're always gonna send me home.
And now, because of complications from that 19-day ordeal, which could have been addressed with a 30-minute procedure on day 1, Carmen Brewster now has an incurable heart condition that she will have to regulate for the rest of her life. Post-Roe America also looks like Amber Nicole Thurman, who arrived at a Georgia hospital suffering from a rare but easily treatable complication after taking abortion medication. She also needed a D&C. But, as reported by ProPublica, because of Georgia's abortion ban, Amber Thurman's doctors didn't feel they could treat her, and so they watched her infection spread, they watched her blood pressure drop, they watched her organs begin to fail for 20 hours before they could bring themselves to operate, and by then it was too late, and Amber Nicole Thurman died, leaving behind a 6-year-old son and a grieving family.
Did she really have to be the sacrifice? I feel like she had to be the sacrifice for the greater good. It hurts so bad because this could have been prevented. And somebody has to be held accountable.
Post-Roe America also looks like Nevaeh Crane, whose story was just reported by ProPublica and the Texas Tribune. She died 6 months pregnant after trying to get care in 3 separate visits to Texas emergency rooms, turned away twice in worse shape than she arrived, and turned away a 3rd time after arriving too weak to walk, feverish and vomiting and blood staining her thighs. She was forced to wait 2 hours for treatment while doctors confirmed that her fetus didn't have a detectable heartbeat. And by then, it was too late. Her blood pressure had dropped, her organs began failing, and hours later, Nevaeh Crane was dead. Post-Roe America looks like Gisele Barnica, whose story was also reported this week by ProPublica. She was 17 weeks pregnant when she learned her pregnancy was not viable. She started to miscarry at a hospital, but doctors told her it would be a crime to speed up the delivery in order to stave off a possible infection. Her husband told ProPublica, quote, "They had to wait until there was no heartbeat." So Gisele laid there in agony for 40 hours while her uterus was exposed to bacteria. And 3 days later, predictably, she died of an infection, leaving her husband to raise their 4-year-old daughter alone. It is hard to imagine doctors letting this happen to their patients, right? But you should know that this system was designed deliberately by anti-abortion politicians, and it is being deliberately upheld by them every day in the face of outcomes like these, which are now well documented and publicly known. In Texas, in particular, Texas's abortion ban, it promises prison time for any health intervention that ends a fetal heartbeat. One health law expert from Georgetown told ProPublica and the Texas Tribune, quote, "Pregnant women have become essentially untouchables." Quote, "In states with abortion bans, patients who have complications in their pregnancies are sometimes bounced between hospitals like hot potatoes, with healthcare providers reluctant to participate in treatment that could attract a prosecutor. In some cases, medical teams are wasting precious time debating legalities and creating documentation, preparing for the possibility that they will need to explain their actions to a judge and jury." And that is not paranoia. It's not an unfounded fear. Here's the situation in Texas. So there are federal guidelines in the United States of America that require hospitals, if a pregnant woman shows up in an ER, federal guidelines require hospitals to stabilize or transfer any pregnant woman who shows up in an ER needing help. But the Texas State Attorney General fought in federal court to be able to force Texas doctors to disregard those federal guidelines. And in court, he won that fight. So it is not a surprise that women are dying here. And it is not mysterious why it is happening or who is causing it. I mean, in Texas, that same state attorney general has intervened himself to stop life-saving care for individual Texas women in crisis. For example, Kate Cox, a 31-year-old mother of 2, she was told her pregnancy was not viable. She was told she needed an abortion to preserve her own health and her future fertility. She had to get court approval for an emergency abortion, and she did. But even once she did that, that same attorney general, his name is Ken Paxton, intervened personally in her case and threatened to prosecute her doctor anyway, even with a court order allowing the abortion she needed. She still had to flee the state in order to get it. This is a fact. Right now, this is not a threat. This is the fact, the lived fact of post-Roe American life. The top law enforcement official in your state can deny you health care and threaten your doctor. Incredibly, and this is something I think most people do not know, the crisis here that we are already in reaches also into postpartum care as well. By which I mean the Trump abortion bans are hurting American women after they give birth as well. Take Caitlin Cash. She needed a DNC to resolve a dangerous complication after she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. But because she gave birth in post-Roe Texas, her life was also endangered because the postpartum care that she needed used the same tools as an abortion.
After my daughter was born, I had a retained placenta. The standard of care treatment for that is a DNC to remove the tissue.
Right.
And the standard of care is to make sure you are having that procedure within 30 minutes of birth. I waited an hour and 49 minutes. I nearly bled out because they couldn't get me the equipment that they needed. And that was 2 years after SB 8 had gone into effect.
Post-Roe America also looks like Kylie Thurman, who had an ectopic pregnancy. An ectopic pregnancy is when a fertilized egg grows somewhere outside the uterus. It is non-viable. An ectopic pregnancy is never a viable pregnancy. It is a deadly threat to a woman if untreated. And the only treatment for an ectopic pregnancy is abortion. And yet Kylie Thurman was initially denied care because of Texas's abortion ban. By the time doctors agreed to give her an injection to end the pregnancy, one of her fallopian tubes had ruptured.
I want to have kids, and I wanted to keep my fallopian tube, but now it's gone. A piece of my womanhood was taken.
Post-Roe America also looks like Deborah Dorbert, who was 5 months pregnant when she learned her baby would not survive. But because of Florida's abortion ban, Deborah Dorbert was not even allowed to have labor induced before carrying her pregnancy to full term, which is to say she was forced by the state of Florida in her grief to carry on that non-viable pregnancy for 3 more months, knowing she would be forced to give birth when and only when the state decided it was okay. And then she would be forced to watch her son die with no help.
I remember my OB handing me a baby boy that was blue and cold, gasping for air for 94 minutes. And I just held him. We just watched our son suffocate. The trauma I went through, I wish it upon no one.
And because abortion has not just been banned, it has been criminalized. This is also what post-Roe America looks like. It looks like 22-year-old Amari Marsh. She suffered a miscarriage in the second trimester of her pregnancy. The state of South Carolina then charged her with murder/homicide by child abuse for a miscarriage. She spent 3 weeks in jail and another 13 months on house arrest before ultimately being cleared by a grand jury for a miscarriage. When abortion is a crime, every miscarriage is a potential criminal investigation. This is what post-Roe America looks like. And if Americans had never truly understood before that abortion is health care, if you thought that was a slogan you didn't quite get from the pro-choice side, we are now learning it in the hardest and most emotional possible way. Since the onset of the first Trump-era abortion bans, 1 in 25 obstetric units in the United States has shuttered. That's according to the March of Dimes. 35% of all U.S. counties are now considered maternity care deserts, 35%, without a single birthing center or obstetric unit. And this collapse of women's health care in our country, in our time, it can be seen in the infant mortality rate as well. It's on the rise nationwide. It is concentrated in the very states that have Trump abortion bans. Take a look at this. Look at this. On the top here, this is a map of abortion restrictions in the states. The red states are the ones with abortion bans. But now look on the bottom. This is a CDC map of states with the highest infant mortality rate in the darker red. The relationship between these two maps is not a coincidence, right? This is a policy decision. and it's costing lives. Women need abortions for a whole host of medical and personal reasons. There is no credible medical or scientific organization that suggests otherwise. We have been so steeped in the idea that abortion is a controversial topic for so long, that it's only a necessary evil, that it's something separate and apart from health care, that we've forgotten that it's health care. In this country, abortion began to be criminalized in the last half of the 19th century as a male-dominated medical profession started to overtake the realm of women's health care that had previously been the dominion of women, of midwives who regularly helped women terminate pregnancies. The Catholic Church didn't start to condemn abortion until the 1860s. It wasn't until the 1970s that it became a partisan issue in this country as the Republican Party under Nixon's leadership took up anti-abortion positions really for the first time as a political strategy to try to create a wedge issue to deliver Catholic votes and socially conservative voters to the GOP. We also know that Richard Nixon's personal take on abortion was much more ambivalent than the message he projected to try to win over religious conservatives. Thanks to his very ill-advised Oval Office tapes, we know Nixon's take was quite ignorant and quite racist on the issue of abortion and quite different than what he was saying in public. I will show you how we know that. The day after Roe versus Wade was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1973, this is how Nixon discussed abortion privately with his staff.
There are times when abortions are necessary. I know that. That's where you have a black and a white.
Like Richard Nixon before him, no one believes now that Republican candidate Donald Trump has a particular interest in abortion beyond politics. He promised to appoint anti-abortion justices to the Supreme Court. He made good on that promise. He thereby brought this health catastrophe down upon this country. But did he care about what it would do to American women? Did he care about who it would kill? On that front, Trump told on himself, not in a secret recording like Nixon, but in a town hall interview with Chris Matthews in 2016.
Should the woman be punished for having an abortion?
Look,
this is not something you can dodge.
If
you say abortion is a crime or abortion is murder, you have to deal with it under the law. Should abortion be punished?
Well, people in certain parts of the Republican Party and conservative Republicans would say yes, they should be punished.
How about you? Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
Punishment for the woman. That's what Donald Trump promised at the outset of his political career. That is what he has delivered as he is now asking for another term in the White House. As we head toward Election Day on Tuesday, Republican candidate Donald Trump does seem to understand that this has been a deeply unpopular thing that he has done. You will hear him talking now about turning abortion over to the states as if it had nothing to do with him. You'll hear him talk about all the exceptions to the abortion bans. But the American people know now, in particular from the wave of journalism we have had about the practical impact of these bans in the last 2 years, we know that the bans are in effect because of him. We know they are in effect in the places where Republicans have political control. And we know that the supposed exceptions don't work at all to keep American women alive in the face of these bans. The American people now know that the Republican Party is actively and openly planning for a fully national abortion ban and to reverse the 20-year-old FDA approval of abortion medication. We know all of that. And the reason nobody knows what the electoral impact will be of the Trump abortion bans is because it is really only now that we have this new understanding, that we have 2 years of journalism, 2 years of testimony, 2 years to start to see the accumulating faces and stories and, frankly, the obituaries for what it means to take this kind of health care away. Americans are not voting in this election on a slogan, on an abstraction about our rights and our freedoms. We are voting, too, for the first time ever, for these women and for every other American woman who these bans are going to kill in Maine. And honestly, the big electoral black box in this election is that nobody yet knows how the power of that will manifest at the polls. Not yet. Ali.
comprehensive as that was, that's 8 faces, and we know of so many more.
Yeah.